Something cold was placed against Drake's forehead, shocking him awake. The boy shot straight up in bed, smacking the intruding hand away, out of panic-induced reflex, as he whipped his head to the side. A young, human woman stared back, eyes wide as she held an ice pack close to her chest. She was shaking like a leaf. Long, golden blonde hair tied back in a ponytail. She wore a long white coat with rust-colored bloodstains on it. Drake blinked and swallowed, throat painfully dry as he looked around. He was in a small, artificially illuminated room with drab gray walls. Bloody bandages and bits of metal lay atop a small rolling table. Drake quickly recognized the bits of metal as Gauss slugs. He slowly turned his head back towards the woman, neck stiff from disuse. "Where am I?" The woman looked at him oddly before saying something in a language he didn't understand. Drake shook his head, wondering if he'd been hit so hard he couldn't understand Geknosian anymore. The young woman nodded and dashed off towards the open door behind him. He watched her go, confusion written on his face. He lifted an arm to stop her, and the realization hit him like a hover transport. He wasn't chained down. Drake looked at his hands, then the bandages that covered his arms and torso. He didn't understand. Who did this? A voice tinted with the rasp of old age grabbed his attention. "Mother of Magnarch, are those whip scars on your back?" "I'm sorry, No. They weren't always like this." Drake whipped his head around, seeing the gray-scaled old Geknosian standing beside the door. He leapt from the bed and charged the old man, pinning him to the wall as his anger flared. "Who the fuck are you?" he shouted, expecting to see fear in the old Geknosian's eyes. But the old lizard just stared back calmly and lifted their hands, showing they had no weapon before speaking. "If you'd calm down, I can tell you. But know this, I am not your enemy." Drake cocked a fist back, ready to break the old gecko's nose for lying, but a woman's voice stopped him. "Let go of Brown and let him explain. He's telling the truth." Drake slowly looked over at the short-haired woman, stunned by the burn scars that covered her face. Gently, she pointed at them. "I was being held face down in a fire pit by a slave merchant after I spit in his face. Brown shot the slave merchant and saved me. I understand all you've known from his species is cruelty, but that's not Brown. Please let him go. For me." Drake slowly, shakily stepped back from the Geknosian, letting him lean against the wall. However, Drake pointed a shaky finger at the Geknosian, growling, "One wrong move." The Geknosians straightened their loose beige robe and nodded sympathetically. "I understand. You have no reason to trust me, and I expected that if I'm being truthful. But, moving on." The Geknosian cleared their throat before continuing. "My name is Brown. Just Brown. I'm, 100 years old now. I've lost track. The point is, I'm not like the rest of them. I was around before the nobility was in control. They're not actually nobility. They are a political movement with aggressive expansionist views. You see, before they took power, the Geknosian people were just like any other, trying to make an honest living in the galaxy. But then..." A look of grief passed over Brown's scaly face as he paused. "But then the nobility came into power, and they wanted everything your people had. We were once close allies, Geknosians and humans. But in a little under a galactic standard year, the nobility had convinced, or culled, those who didn't agree with them. Then they struck. Geknosian ships fired upon the humans they once called allies, decimating humanity's galactic fleet before dropping onto the now unguarded planets of humanity. Your people fought well, but they were caught by surprise. 5 years and it was over. The nobility had won." Drake felt his legs go a little weak as he collapsed back onto the bed, trying to comprehend what he'd been told. "Then they enslaved us?" Drake asked, stunned. Brown nodded, then looked straight into Drake's eyes. "The thing is, you humans never gave up. Even now, slave revolts regularly break out. But, sadly, they're brutally and rapidly put down. But you..." Brown's eyes seemed to glow with vindication.
But you struck fear into the heart of the monarch. You killed 100 royal knights with nothing but a sword and a scream. You made them fear you. And while I don't know the sacrifices you've made, I can tell you this.
The old Geknosian jabbed a clawed finger at Drake.
You are their nightmare, the key to their downfall, and I'd like to help you on that journey.
Drake looked at the old Geknosian. No, Brown. Feeling a kindred spirit behind those 4 slit-pupiled eyes. He nodded, understanding now. I think I could do with some help. But first, can I get something to drink? I'm thirstier than a freshly plowed field. Brown smiled.
Of course.
Drake walked through the brightly lit Duracrete halls with Brown. The old Geknosian had given him new clothing to replace his torn rags. The supple leather of the pants hugged Drake's legs. A loose cloth tunic rested beneath a chest plate of segmented black metal. Drake adjusted the shoulder pads, getting used to how the armor moved with him. It was ridiculously light, and moved effortlessly with him. Where did you get this, and what is it? The boy asked Brown, who gave him a sly grin.
It's called a titanite, not to be confused with the much weaker titanium. It's an ultra-light, ultra-rare metal with exceptional durability and hardness. It should stop anything short of an artillery piece. As to where we got it, we stole it from the monarch.
Drake looked at the old Geknosian in utter disbelief before grinning. I'm starting to like you, you old lizard. Brown chuckled good-naturedly as they rounded a corner to a hallway that ended in a vault door.
I'm glad to hear it. It would be a real shame if you stuck a knife in my throat while I wasn't looking.
Drake nodded as they came to a stop in front of the giant metal door. Hey, that's still a possibility if you decide to join the nobility. The old Geknosian smiled. Drake was only half joking.
If Cassandra doesn't kill me first. However, I'd rather die than join them.
Drake smiled and patted the old lizard on the shoulder. Nodding at the door, he asked, So, what's in here? Waving his hand in a subtle gesture, the massive vault door swung inwards, revealing racks upon racks of projectile weaponry. Brown grinned wickedly, stating,
Forgive me for using a human phrase, but guns. Lots of guns.